Okay, so welcome to the Velero community meeting. This is September 3rd, 2024, the US-Europe centric time zone meeting. So we'll go ahead and jump into status. Daniel?
Yeah, I have a few updates. First, the Velero.io, it was hosted via Netify, and due to some billing issue, at this moment I had to migrate it to my personal account, which is a free plan. I checked the plan, and there's some limitation in bandwidth and build counts. So I'll keep an eye on the dashboard. Hopefully, the resource is enough. Even to see any issue accessing Velero.io, please reach out to me via Slack. And secondly is the earlier discussion. I updated the wiki to push the FCA date to September 11th. The third one is we go through the issue currently we are working on in Beijing internally, and I labeled two of them as deferred candidate. I'll add a link to the HackMD 1 minute later, but please take a look, Shubham and Scott. If you have any concern, please let me know. Otherwise, sure. Before FC, I'll kick it out of 1.15. That's all from me. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. So on my side, the backup performance improvements work is ongoing. The third PR, we had some reviews. That was great. I responded to the comments. I will update the PR today. There were definitely some changes that I need to make as response to the comments. Let me know if my response to those where I don't think we need to make a change is appropriate. I think there are a couple of things brought up that might make sense as future scope items. But I think as long as we kind of limit the scope to the obvious things to fix that don't require new design, I think we should have no problem getting that in by the 11th. That was kind of my main thinking on a couple of things that I suggested that were good ideas in the comments that probably make more sense later, is because they would require additional design work, which we obviously have no time for 1.15. But I will, as indicated in the comments, there are a few of those changes that I will make, some refactoring and some simple changes. I should get those out today, my time. So hopefully that can get reviewed tomorrow. Anyway, I think we're on track if we keep up with the PRs, the reviews and my changes. Get that done by the 11th. And then I didn't get the doc PR started because I was still working on this and some other stuff. So I will start working on that doc PR this week to document the new plugin type and how users would create that to interact with the changes. Anshul?
Yeah, just one small bug fix, minor PR. Just want a quick approval if someone can have a look. Yeah, nothing much else to call. Thanks.
Sure. Shubham?
Yeah, just an update on the backup PVC config. We had some minor fixes put in for volume mounts. I think that PR got merged last week, and other than that, there was one issue that Daniel, you tagged me for 115. I had opened. I marked it as closed because we are not seeing this internally in downstream, so we are good on that. Other than that, PR reviews. That's it.
Okay. Mikhail?
Yes, so I have two things. First, do we want to discuss here further the Copia release cadence and how this plays with Velero? So that's my first open question, because I think there needs to be some discussion and some either automation to test things or further improve how the Copia is being pulled by Velero fork.
So after reading the latest comment by Yonghui, you still have some concern. Is that the case? That was
I not concerns, but I carefully reviewed all the hashes from downstream from Velero fork, and it looks like there is for every Velero release there is a bump plus n+2 of the fork plus some extra patches. So it's not that I thought that your comment was around backporting patches to the previous versions of Velero, but it seems like the patches are applied on top of n+2 branch of Copia. So it's a bit against Copia policy that Velero bumps it +2. And I wonder if there is something we could do here to either ensure that the Copia repository is migrated to a newer version where we will find that backup repository was created with a n-2 version, or maybe there is some other means to prevent something that we didn't experience at all at the moment, but I'm just worried that we may in the future.
So I was just going to say one thing on top of that. I think we all agree that there's no incompatibilities right now. I think we've tested it; it's fine. I think our concern is more kind of future-proofing this, because Copia only guarantees n-1. They obviously they've stated they try to make it compatible longer than that, but that n-1 gives them the ability in the future to say, hey, we're making this bigger change, and then we may lose that ability to go 2 to 4 releases with compatibility. And I think the concern on our side is, maybe we want to have some mechanism, even if it's optional, to add some part of the maintenance job, maybe as one possibility, to say, optionally, I want to upgrade this repo to the version of the current Copia. And it wouldn't be an automatic thing, but that's one thing we've talked about. But I think in general, going forward, we want to make sure that, if something is from, say, n-2 versions of Velero, we should be able to restore it still. That might be n-4 or even more. I mean, the Copia 2, n-2 is not really a policy. It's more, we upgrade Velero, we have 4 months or so, and in that time, Copia is bumped 2 releases. So I think that's kind of where that 2 comes in, is the Copia's release cadence tends to be a little bit more frequent than Velero's.
Right. In my discussion with Yonghui, because Yonghui is mainly taking the responsibility maintaining the fork Copia, but he mentioned that he will review the comments, and the Copia release in a relatively high frequency, so the change is relatively small. And he also mentioned that Velero is not using all the features of Copia, just use a part of the feature. So he's not very, he doesn't believe that can be a issue. Although Copia mentioned that they can guarantee only n+1, but actually, in reality, after a few minor releases, they didn't break anything. But yeah, in future, when that happened, we will be very, careful, like cherry picking the, latest comments to ensure that we don't introduce the breakage from Copia to Velero. I think that one we need to ensure that via code review and testing. I think that's what we can do.
I also checked that between one version of Velero, there was around 200 Copia commits. So I'm not sure if this is in line what you were reviewing, like every single Copia.
Yes, because Yonghui said, because we reviewed that, and that does mitigate some issue we are seeing in our environment. So that's why we cherry pick them. Yeah. So you're saying that we're cherry picking some latest comment to an older version of Copia. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, I think the issue is more, it's not just that we're cherry picking to older, it's that, if I'm on Velero, say 1.12, I'm on Copia 0.13. Velero 1.14 is not just, the 0.13 plus a few cherry pick commits. It's the entire 0.17 release, which is 200 commits later, plus some cherry picks. So we're having those cherry picks for compatibility maybe, but we also are getting the entirety of, the 0.13 to 0.17, which, right now Copia is not incompatible, because there was n-1 as a worst case scenario. They're not saying it will be incompatible. They're saying they're not guaranteeing that it will, if it is compatible. And I think the concern is we may want to talk about how, in addition to that, provide some way in the future, maybe in Velero 1.16, I don't know, to because Copia does have the ability to upgrade a repo to say, I want to take this repo from 0.13 and I want to upgrade it to 0.18 or whatever, and they guarantee that the upgrade process works across multiple versions. So that might be a safer way of, in addition to testing, to make sure that when you get a new repo, a new Velero version, you end up, because the other problem is, even if you upgrade Velero, so I say I do a backup with Velero and 1.12, that's Copia 0.13. Then I upgrade Velero. Because the Copia backups are incremental, I'm still using that backup repository. I have a nightly backup of my namespace. I've upgraded Velero several times, but I'm still in that old Copia repo version because the Copia repo was initialized at 0.13. We may eventually have a version SKU in the Copia repository much bigger than saying, because I'm not backing up. I'm not going to be restoring old Velero backups anymore. But my Velero backup through Copia is incremental. That goes back through several versions. So the upgrade repo might guard against that problem going forward as well.
Yeah. So you're suggesting before Velero accessing like a Copia repo during restore, Velero should try to do necessary migration if needed. Is that what you're proposing?
I don't know if that's the right time for it. I think Copia maintenance might be a better time for it, but I think we need some mechanism of being able to migrate the Copia repo format to whatever current version of Velero. Because I think the right time to do it for most users would be when they upgrade Velero. But I think we talked about this internally last week as well. I think we were agreeing too that this shouldn't be an automatic process that happens, behind the scenes. The user needs to make an explicit decision, because if you're sharing that, because the BSL can be shared across multiple Velero instances. If you're using the same BSL with two different clusters and one is an older Velero, you don't want to upgrade the Copia repo to newer, because then you will break it. If I have a Copia repo for 0.17, that's not necessarily going to work with Copia 0.13, because that's the wrong kind of compatibility. So I think the upgrade needs to be user specified, but I think it's through Copia maintenance or something like that it makes sense. Not, but I think that's something that needs its own design. I think it's
I think that's a reasonable suggestion, and if we want to do that, we need a design. And
exactly.
I think I'll take that to Yonghui, and I think we can discuss that in the next community meeting.
That makes sense. And again, I think the key, my concern here is not just, I'm going to restore a backup from, say, 2 Velero releases ago, but it's also because of the incremental nature. As I started back up on Velero 1.12, I upgrade to 1.13. I do an incremental backup by upgrading. So eventually you might have a much bigger SKU because of the incremental nature. And that's where I think we want the ability to upgrade. But it needs to be user controlled. That's where the design comes in, because obviously we have to think carefully about how to handle the use cases.
Could you also summarize your thoughts and add a comment to
on the issue? Yeah, sure.
Wes, you raised the hand, right?
Yeah, so thanks for raising this. I think I agree with everyone and what we're saying, and compliments to ensuring that so far, like, the backwards compatibility hasn't been an issue. That's awesome. I'm not sure how transparent we've been as the Velero community about how we're managing that Copia repository. And I think one thing that could help is if on a major, I guess a Y release of Velero, if in the release notes we included some notes about what version Copia was upgraded to. Maybe list cherry picks, and well, I think more importantly, if there is compatibility testing, I know we are doing some amount of compatibility testing downstream, but it would be awesome to include that also in the release notes if it's possible.
Agreed. I think we can include that in release note. Also, maybe when Yonghui do the bump up, you are not aware of that. I think that also can be improved. Like, before we plan to do the bump up, we will let you know, and so everyone is aware of this change earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense too. But I think the release notes in particular, it's good to say, I mean, if you look in go.mod, you can say, oh, okay, I see that this is, Copia 0.17, but if the release notes include, Velero 1.14 is based on Copia 1.17 with, the following cherry picked commits, for bug or whatever reason, just like our release notes mentioned that, the changes in Velero and what we fixed. If we have some cherry picks,
Sure.
and Copia, we should include that too, just so that anyone that's using it can see, what they're dealing with on the Copia side.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a little bit detailed, but when we bump up a pin to a specific commit of the forked Copia, we manually tag release in the forked repo, so we can reference the release node in that Copia and from Copia's release node, and you can refer to that release node for more details. Maybe that will work, but we are open for discussion. I think whatever Wes you suggested and Scott, whatever you suggested, please also add comments so that when we are having the weekly meeting, we can discuss that in more depth.
In that issue that Mihao pointed out in 8136 you're referring to?
Correct.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I think we have a couple different things going on there right now. Eventually, we may need to split that into issues, but I think for now, that's the one kind of central place. I think right now we're talking about two different things. Transparency about the current process, and then there's also this kind of future work of possibly providing a mechanism for repo upgrades. But for now, I guess we'll just kind of mix it all there, and then we can split the issues once we kind of have some general agreement as to how we're going forward.
Sure.
Okay, and then.
The second is just FYI, I proposed a patch, but I still don't know why it happens, because there was a comment from, I think I pronounced it correctly, Wenkei Yin, that my proposed solution for it may be incorrect, and I'm still struggling to understand why this was visible in our logs, because I kind of agree with what was written by Wenkei Ying that the patched version of the managed field should not contain the resource version, and this should not cause this problem. So then I'm out of ideas why we are seeing this. And probably my next actions will be to build a special version of Velero for us, because this is a very random error. So it's not something that is easily reproducible. We can only see this from the logs after our test. And I will probably build a special version of Velero, which will give us much more information in the logs of what was the resource being patched, what was the original version, what was the patch made for, and where exactly the problem happened. And then we can have more information how to fix this properly.
Sure, but that will not block 1.15 FC, right? So we can merge that even perfectly. I mean, because we are approaching the FC milestone, that will not block the FC.
I think currently my PR is blocked based on the comments.
Yes, but I mean, does this PR block 1.15 FC? For example, if we continue discussing without reaching consensus, this PR will not be merged. But I think we're gonna move forward with 1.15, right?
Yeah. I don't think this blocks 1.15. I think we continue to discuss it. I think if we come upon an agreement, I think this falls in the category of a bug fix, really. So if we agree on it, I think we can merge it later. We can have that discussion. To me, this feels like a bug fix, not a new feature. If we have to push it out to 1.15.1, because, and again, obviously we want to get it right. So if, we haven't figured out exactly what the fix is yet, so we can't merge it yet. But I don't think this is the kind of thing this should delay 1.15 release, I think, if that's the question.
Yeah, I would agree.
But I think since it's a bug fix, I think if we do come up with an answer, before final code freeze, I think we probably have the ability still to merge it in. But again, we don't wait for it. And if because we need to get the fix right.
Yeah, it was one of those fixes that I'm pretty certain that this PR is fixing the issue, but I don't have the answer. What was the root cause?
Right. In other words, we're pretty sure this PR fixes the issue. The question is this the right fix, or is there some other thing that we need to do instead?
Yes.
I think that's, I guess, where we are right now.
Exactly. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. And Tiger.
Right, so I had the same PRs ready for review. I'll update my implementation PR to match.
Yeah, I think that's already approved.
Yeah, the design's approved. It looks like we can merge that. Yeah, I think we have. I think. Yeah, I know. I asked that last week. And so we just need to. Sounds like. So Tiger, you said you had some changes to make to this, or is this ready for review?
Yeah, I had a comment about Doc, and thanks for Tiger making this change. I added my approval.
Okay. I just thought it got merged. Okay, so yeah, I'll just need to update the implementation PR, and that's all for me this week.
Okay.
Hi, this is Yun Chen from Dell. I have one question.
Sure.
On the issue I opened last week. So basically, with Dell right now is using Velero.
What's the issue number?
Yeah, the one about dependency, right?
Yeah, the dependency. So basically, I checked through. Looks like on the 1.14, Velero using a lot of new SDK of AWS and Azure.
Correct.
So, but on our Dell side, right now we don't want to add so many dependency on our side, because if only we use it, we will add a lot of dependency on our side also. So I'm discussing with Tiger on that. So
yeah, it looks like Tiger had a suggestion for how to fix this.
Yeah, I think Shun is working out a PR to, because he is working on some other issue, and when his PR merged, he mentioned that this dependency may be simplified a little bit, but in general, introduce such dependency, maybe sometimes it's inevitable, or we cannot consider that too much, because Velero binary itself is relatively self-contained.
Yeah,
and as long as that works.
Yeah, I think the issue isn't so much the Velero binary. The issue is when someone else is including Velero as a dependency in their project. You only need certain packages from Velero. So if I'm working on something AWS specific and I'm using Velero, I don't need to pull in Azure. So I think and Tiger's comment was suggesting if we're careful about how we make our packages and make the packages that have cloud specific dependencies a bit smaller, we can isolate that. So if a Velero file needs Azure, AWS, and everything, it can import them all separately. That way. Someone outside of Velero, for example, if I'm writing a plugin for Velero and I need something under, one of these config directories, I don't need to pull in AWS and Azure things in my plugin, which won't be doing anything specific to those. So I think here's something where, like you said, we can't guarantee we'll never have a bunch of dependencies, but if we can be careful about how we and kind of refactor the way we do imports to try to isolate the need for these cloud Cloudflare specific dependencies, I think that's a good design approach. Obviously in the future we can't guarantee it, but if we have a solution here for this particular problem that simplifies it, we might as well do it.
So the thing is, right now the way we install Velero is there is install function inside the package of Velero. I don't remember. So
I discussed it with Shun.
Yeah, so that because previously Dell is using the binary to install Velero, but right now we use that function. I think that's the reason why, because looks like in that package right now you are using. I go through your PR on the list release, because you add some new feature about the authentication on Azure, right? So, and that's why it's. Yeah. Okay. I will keep a follow up on this. So
but even after this one merged, we can't guarantee that all your dependency issue is resolved. If that persists, you feel free to write a PR to refactor the code. but of course that has to make sense and
Yeah.
it will be
Okay.
possible to fix your problem. Yeah, we'll try to review it and help you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Good.
Okay. And were there any other issues that need discussing, or are we wrapped up here?
Anything that needs to be done for the Velero.io website? Daniel, you mentioned that you migrated to personal account.
Nothing need to be done at this moment, but if you are noticing that you have issue like opening Velero.io, please feel free to let me know. I will go to the Netify dashboard and double check what's wrong.
So,
But from my understanding, yeah.
Is this a temporary issue on the Broadcom side that you eventually move back into something not your personal account, or?
I think moving to my personal account at this moment is a temporary solution, but I'm not sure we will have a long-term solution now. But yeah, I think this, maybe stay under my personal account for a while, because yeah, some internal process stuff. If you have any other suggestion, I'm open for discussion.
Yeah.
But again, this may need to get some other discussion internally before I can, offer like agreement. But as long, I mean, at this moment, it stays at my personal account.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
And,
fine for now as long as you're monitoring. It does feel
Mhm.
like it's kind of a fragile, kind of long-term solution.
Well,
So it would be good to come up with something better. I just don't have an answer right now as to what that might be.
Yeah. So, I mean, I
Yeah.
think first of all, I want to say thanks for running it over to your personal account and making sure users don't see any impact. So
Mhm.
thank you. Secondly, and I know we're all limited in what our corporations and our managers allow and don't allow, but for an open source project, one as mature as Velero, the way we're using infrastructure in this project is a little bit suspect. And I've always been interested in maintainers having the ability to get onto infrastructure and run these things in a shared way. That's usually what I've seen in larger open source projects. But I know whatever, we can only do what we can do with regards to our corporate
Yeah.
overlords.
Yeah.
Are you interested in this case, maybe possibly I can go get a hosting site from Red Hat and see if we can't share this burden with you and maybe get it hosted and give you access to said shared resources?
I personally has no disagreement. I have no disagreement, but currently we are undergoing a reorg. So after everything's settled, I will talk to my manager or even senior managers and
Yeah.
see what they're thinking. Yeah, and I'll get back to you.
Okay. And I think more generally speaking, if you could poke at management and see if having some, outside non-Broadcom
Mhm.
folks use shared infrastructure, if that's a possibility, I'd be interested in hearing it.
Yeah. I'll put that
Yeah.
on my to-do list, but such discussion may take some time. So
Oh, yeah.
That's fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, do you want me to look into maybe Red Hat carrying the site while if it's
Yeah,
going to
you
be
can
troublesome?
look into that. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, you can look into that, but whether we're gonna take that approach is not
Sure.
fully decided by me. So.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, that's it for me.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining, everyone. We'll have our meeting on the other time zone next week, as usual, and have a great week.
All right, thanks, Scott. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.
Bye-bye.